What the Study Says.
Welcome back to What the Study Says. I'm Dr. Kai.
And I'm Dr. May. You know, we usually sort of ease into these deep dives.
What do you do?
But today I feel like we're standing at the edge of a cliff and the government just shoved 40 years of nutrition advice right off of it.
That is a pretty good way to put it. It certainly feels that way. We're looking at the new Dietary Guidelines for Americans 2025-2030.
Right, and the scientific foundation report that goes with it.
And if you are still mentally organizing your plate based on, say, the old food pyramid, or even my plate, you might want to sit down.
Because this isn't an update, it's a demolition.
It really is a hard reset. We poured over hundreds of pages of these documents, and the tone is, well, it's shocking.
It's not the polite bureaucratic suggestions we're used to at all. It's urgent. It's aggressive.
The stated mission in the foreword is literally to make America healthy again.
And to do that, they are recommending things that would have been nutritional heresy just 5 years ago.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking a complete reversal on dairy fat, a huge increase in recommended protein, a specific war on ultra-processed foods.
And a shift in philosophy that changes the very lens through which the government looks at public health.
So before we get to the what to eat, and we will get there, because you need to hear about the butter and the steak.
We have to talk about the why, because the intro to this report drops a bombshell.
It does. To really understand this, we have to look at the administrative context. The report explicitly says that the current administration rejected the initial draft.
The one from the previous advisory committee.
Exactly. That almost never happens. Usually the government just rubber stamps the committee's work.
But they didn't. They threw a huge chunk of it out. Why? I mean, what was the conflict?
It really boils down to a philosophical disagreement. The previous committee viewed the science through what they called a health equity lens.
Okay, what does that mean in this context?
It meant evaluating nutritional data while heavily weighing factors like race, ethnicity, culture, and socioeconomic status. The goal was to make the guidelines inclusive.
Which, on the surface, sounds like a noble goal. We want advice that works for everyone, so why reject it?
Well, the Scientific Foundation report argues that by embedding that equity framework into the scientific review, the committee was sort of reversing the proper sequence.
So policy first, then science.
That's their argument.
Yeah.
That science, biology, metabolism, physiology is universal. They claim filtering hard data through a sociological lens diluted the advice. Essentially, they argued, biology doesn't care about your culture. Insulin resistance works the same way in everyone.
So they pivoted from equity to strictly metabolic health.
Exactly. And they brought receipts to justify it. The statistics in the opening chapter are, they're absolutely terrifying.
They really are.
They argue that we are in a crisis so severe that we don't have the luxury of worrying about whether the advice is culturally sensitive. We just need to stop people from dying.
I have those numbers highlighted right here. They note that today, over 70% of American adults carry excess weight.
70%.
Over 40% meet the clinical criteria for obesity. And this is the one that floored me.
I know which one you're going to say.
More than 50% of the adult population has diabetes or pre-diabetes.
Think about that. If you walk into a room, statistically, half the people there have broken metabolic machinery.
And it's not just adults. The report highlights that 1 in 4 children is now pre-diabetic.
1 in 4.
That's a quarter of our kids. That is a catastrophic failure of public health.
And that's the stance of this new document. The argument is, whatever we were doing before, the low-fat, grain-heavy, culturally accommodating advice, it failed.
So the new guideline is a return to basics, a shift from how do we make food fair to how do we stop everyone from getting sick.
Right.
So if the strategy is changing, the enemy must be changing too. For years, the boogeyman was fat. Then it was
salt. And now there, the villain has a name. It's the standard American diet, but specifically ultra-processed foods, UPFs.
We hear that term thrown around a lot, but this is the first time the government is really codifying it, right?
Yes. They're using the NOVA food classification system to draw a hard line in the sand.
And this is crucial for you to understand because processed is a vague word. Cooking is processing. Chopping is processing.
Exactly. If you make a stew, you've processed the ingredients. But that would be NOVA Group 1 or 2 unprocessed or processed culinary ingredients.
Things like oils, butter, sugar, starch.
Right. Stuff you use in cooking, Those are fine. The guidelines are targeting Nova Group 4.
Okay, so give us the definition of Group 4.
The report calls them highly processed or engineered food-like products.
Food-like products. Wow, that is scathing.
It's chemically accurate. We're talking about mass-produced cookies, chips, sugary cereals, reconstituted meat products, and ready-to-eat meals that are shelf-stable for years.
And the recommendation is just blunt.
It is. Avoid highly processed foods.
Not limit.
Avoid.
But why? I mean, obviously a cookie isn't as good for you as an apple. Is it just about the empty calories, or is there something else at play?
This is where we get into the mechanism.
Yeah.
The report cites emerging evidence that the very structure of these foods, the food matrix, is destroying our satiety signaling.
The feeling of being full.
Right.
Yeah.
When you eat a steak or a piece of broccoli, you have to chew it. It takes time to digest. It signals your gut hormones to say, hey, I'm full.
Whereas a bag of chips just
Melts in your mouth.
Yeah.
You can consume 1,000 calories of UPFs in minutes, and your body doesn't even register it.
And it's more than that, isn't it? It's about the additives, too.
It is. The report discusses how things like emulsifiers, gums, artificial sweeteners, they may be disrupting the gut microbiome.
Which drives inflammation and insulin resistance.
Exactly. So it's not just that the food has sugar. It's that the food is literally engineered to bypass your body's natural stop button.
So if we are tossing out all the factory-made stuff, what are we replacing it with? The heroes of this story seem to be, well, basically a farm.
The motto from the secretaries is eat real food. But this is where it gets really controversial. There's a massive fight behind the scenes about protein.
Oh, I read about this, the symbolic reordering.
Right. The previous committee wanted to change the order of the protein list. They wanted to put beans, peas, and lentils at the very top.
Above meat.
Above meat, to psychologically nudge Americans toward plant-based eating.
Which lines up with a lot of the environmental narratives we hear.
It does. But the new 2025 guidelines explicitly rejected that. They called it a symbolic reordering lacking scientific justification.
So in the final document,
Animal sources, eggs, poultry, seafood, red meat are listed right alongside plant sources. There was absolutely no deprioritization of meat.
in fact, looking at the photos in the source material, it's very carnivorous.
It is. There's a whole roasted chicken, a raw steak, a salmon fillet.
It feels like they're giving people permission to eat meat again, but aren't we constantly told that red meat causes cancer and heart disease?
They didn't ignore that. They added nuance. The guidelines make a very sharp distinction between unprocessed red meat and processed meats.
Okay, so things like hot dogs, sausages, deli meats.
Exactly. The stuff loaded with nitrates and preservatives, they specifically warn against those. But a steak, a burger made of just ground beef, they categorize that as high-quality protein.
And they want us to eat a lot of it. I was doing the math on the new protein recommendations, and honestly, I thought I miscalculated.
It is a significant jump. The new recommendation is 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight.
Per day.
Per day.
Okay, let's unpack that for everyone listening because grams per kilo is hard to visualize. If I'm a standard guy, say 180 pounds, that's about 82 kilograms.
Right. So at the high end, 1.6 grams, you're looking at roughly 130 grams of protein a day.
130 grams. That is a lot. The old RDA was what, like 60 grams?
Something like that.
We are doubling the baseline.
We are. And the reasoning is metabolic health and aging. The report cites data showing the old RDA was barely enough to prevent deficiency, but nowhere near enough for optimal function.
So to prevent sarcopenia,
which is the muscle loss we get as we age. To prevent that and keep the metabolism firing, we need that higher amino acid load.
But is that realistic? 130 grams of protein is like a 4-egg omelet for breakfast, a big chicken breast for lunch, and a decent-sized steak for dinner.
It is a high volume of food, but think about what it displaces.
Good point.
If you're eating that much protein, you physically don't have room for the bagel, the chips, or the pasta. Protein is the most satiating macronutrient. It's a strategy to crowd out the UPFs.
So we're eating steak and eggs, but here's the kicker. How are we cooking them? Because the biggest shock in this entire report, for me, was in the dairy aisle.
The death of the low-fat dogma.
This is huge. For decades, the government told us, if you eat dairy, make it skim. Replace butter with margarine.
I grew up on skim milk. It looked like gray water.
Me too.
Well, the new report says that long-standing advice is being challenged by emerging evidence. And the source images explicitly show a carton of whole milk.
Wait, hold on. We have been told for 40 years that saturated fat clogs arteries. Are they just walking that back?
They are differentiating between the food sources. The report suggests the matrix of dairy matters.
What does that mean, the matrix?
It means the fat in dairy might actually help with nutrient absorption, specifically vitamins A, D, E, and K, which are fat-soluble.
Right. Without fat, you don't absorb them as well.
Exactly. Plus, again, satiety. Skim milk spikes your blood sugar faster than whole milk because the fat slows down digestion.
So butter is back.
In moderation. It's listed under healthy fats alongside olive oil, but at the same time, there's a new target on the back of something else. High linoleic acid vegetable oils.
You see this in the avoid list. These are the industrial seed oils, soybean oil, corn oil, canola oil.
Right. And for anyone who isn't a biochemist, linoleic acid is an omega-6 fatty acid. We need some of it. But the report argues the modern American diet has massive amounts of it.
Because it's in every processed food.
It's in the salad dressing, the mayo, the chips, the bread.
Everything.
And when you have way too much omega-6 and not enough omega-3, it drives systemic inflammation. So the guidelines are steering you toward traditional fats, olive oil, butter, and away from these industrial, highly refined oils.
It's so ironic we spent decades engineering these heart-healthy vegetable oils to replace dangerous butter, and now the science is saying, actually, just eat the butter.
It's a return to the farm table. It's eating like your great-grandmother ate.
Okay, so we've covered protein and fat. Let's talk about the third rail, carbohydrates. Are they banning bread?
Not banning, but they are severely restricting the definition of what counts as a quality carb. And this leads to what I think is the biggest practical change for grocery shoppers.
The definition of healthy.
Yes. I saw the table on the FDA's healthy claim. The sugar limits are, well, they're draconian.
They are incredibly strict. Let's look at yogurt. For a yogurt to be called healthy under the new guidelines, it must have less than 2.5 grams of added sugar per serving.
2.5 grams. I checked my fridge this morning. The healthy fruit on the bottom yogurt I have has 14 grams of added sugar.
14. So under the new rules, that yogurt is basically a dessert. It can't be marketed as a health food.
No. This effectively bans almost the entire flavored yogurt aisle.
And cereals.
The limit is less than 5 grams of added sugar. That wipes out Honey Nut Cheerios, Raisin Bran, most granolas.
Almost everything except what? Plain oats or plain shredded wheat?
Pretty much.
This feels like a direct attack on the standard American breakfast.
It is. Because the standard American breakfast is essentially dessert. These guidelines are trying to break the habit of starting the day with a massive glucose spike.
They want you to eat fruit, but they want you to eat the food.
Right. Not the juice and not a food-flavored syrup in your yogurt. They emphasize the original form. And apple has fiber and structure. Apple juice is just sugar water.
Okay, we've covered a lot of theory. Let's make this practical. What does a day of eating actually look like on this new pyramid?
Well, it's not really a pyramid anymore. It's more of a plate. But let's run through the daily servings for a standard 2,000-calorie diet.
Okay. Start with veggie.
You're aiming for 3 cups of vegetables a day. And let's be real about what 3 cups looks like. It's not a tiny side salad.
No, it's a large volume of food. It's half your plate at lunch and half your plate at dinner.
Correct. Plus 2 cups of fruit.
Then protein.
3 to 4 servings. And if you're hitting that high protein goal we discussed, this is substantial.
So like 3 eggs at breakfast, 6 ounces of chicken on that giant salad at lunch.
And a steak at dinner, yes.
And dairy.
3 cups. But remember, this is full-fat dairy. So maybe a Greek yogurt with berries for a snack, some cheese on your salad, and a glass of milk.
What about grains? This is where people get confused.
A chart lists 3 to 6 servings, but the range is variable, and the emphasis is exclusively on whole grains.
So oats, brown rice, quinoa.
Yes. The refined carbohydrate category, white bread, flour, tortillas, crackers, that's explicitly targeted for reduction.
And if you're eating that much protein and veggies, you probably don't have much room left for grains anyway.
That's the idea.
So the new pyramid is basically meat, eggs, dairy, piles of vegetables, some fruit, and a little bit of rice or oats on the side. And you cook it all in butter or olive oil.
That's a pretty good summary. It sounds delicious, but let's address the elephant in the room.
This requires cooking.
A lot of cooking. You can't buy this diet at a drive-thru.
No, you can't. Moving away from UPF means moving toward the kitchen.
And the guidelines acknowledge that. They say prioritize nutrient-dense foods and home-prepared meals.
So taking a step back, we've gone from equity back to biology. We've demonized the center aisles of the grocery store. We've brought back butter.
It feels like the definition of healthy has gotten much stricter, but also somehow much simpler.
It cuts through the noise. You don't need to count points or check if the packaging says low fat or heart healthy.
In fact, if the packaging is making a bunch of health claims, it's probably a UPF you should avoid.
You just need to ask, is this real food? Is this a plant or an animal?
It's a bold bet. The government is betting that if we just stop eating food-like products and return to a biologically appropriate diet, we can reverse those terrifying diabetes stats.
It's a validation of what a lot of independent health experts have been shouting about for years.
That the metabolic health crisis isn't caused by a lack of will. It's caused by a toxic food environment. These guidelines are finally admitting that.
Before we let you go, I want to leave you with a thought. We've been talking about the science, but I can't stop thinking about the logistics.
What do you mean?
Well, look at this diet. High-quality protein, fresh vegetables, whole fruit, butter, olive oil.
It's an expensive grocery list.
It is. Pasta and seed oils are cheap. Steak and fresh produce are not.
That's true.
So if the government is now advising 70% of the population, many of whom are on tight budgets, to switch from cheap grain-based calories to expensive, perishable, high-quality proteins, is that even economically viable?
That is the crucial question. By removing the equity lens, they focused on the best science for the human body, which is great. But they may have inadvertently created a guideline that is financially out of reach for the people who need it most.
It creates a situation where health becomes a luxury good. If the science says eat steak, but your wallet says buy ramen, the metabolic crisis isn't going to get solved just because the guidelines changed.
That's a massive tension that isn't resolved in these pages.
Something to chew on, preferably while chewing on some real food. If you found this deep dive helpful, please subscribe and share the channel. We love digging into these reports so you don't have to.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to your health.
Thanks for joining us on What the Study Says. We'll see you in the next deep dive.